Welcome back to Search Ahead. As you know, we started this series of interviews with the intention of knowing how the pandemic affected our colleagues in the field. We also interviewed professionals in other African countries who told us about their experience during the crisis. And now we feel the need of going a bit forward and provide conversations about different issues related to global surgery and global health. To achieve this, today we have invited two guests, Dr. Julio Mayol and Dr. Julio Mayol and Dr. Dominique Vervoort, to have a conversation with us. My colleague, Dr. Sinead Bentounzi, my colleague at SURG-Africa, will also join this conversation. How are you, Sinead?
Hi, Antonio. I'm fine, thank you. Happy to be here with you.
Likewise, to be here. And I'm going to start the introductions first with Dr. Julio Mayol. He's from 2011 full professor of surgery at Complutense University of Madrid, where he is also a member of the Center for Surgical Studies. And he's medical director of the San Carlos Clinical Hospital. And from 2010, director of the Innovation Unit of the San Carlos Health Research. He's also the Vice President of the Foundation for Biomedical Research, San Carlos, and Secretary of the British Journal of Surgery Society, known by BJS. And I think I cover most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a long list.
Yeah, that's more than enough.
Well, thank you for being here. How are you, Dr. Julio?
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you to have this conversation about many different aspects.
Definitely. Thank you.
And we have also Dr. Vervoort. So he graduated from Leuven University in Belgium and then completed the Paul Farmer Global Surgery Fellowship at Harvard Medical School. He is now candidate for a dual master's in public health and business administration at Johns Hopkins. Dr. Vervoort is well known in the field of global surgery as he has co-founded and co-chaired for 3 years the International Student Surgical Network known as InciSion. Dr. Vervoort, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, and thank you so much, Tina, for the kind introduction, and to you, Antonio, and SURG-Africa. For the invitation. It's a great honor as well to be here together with Dr. Mayol and to speak about something that's very close to my heart in terms of global surgery advocacy and Twitter and social media use more broadly.
I'm going to start a question to Dr. Mayol. The last weekend it took place Summit for Surgery, the first virtual summit, but it's the second summit that you actually have. Could you just tell us a little bit more about it and how this initiative began and why?
Yes, on Saturday we celebrated the second Summit for Surgery summit. This is the first virtual summit. And it all began like 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, on July 28th, 2018. And it was just like a game. We had started something called colorectal surgery, the hashtag, and we had seen that people was able to collaborate to do things, to start projects. So we thought, why not? Why don't we apply this to the field of surgery in general? And the reason for this was to bring meaning in. People think and use the term social media and social networks as equivalent, and they are not. Facebook, LinkedIn are social networks. You create a community, it can be rather closed, and you only collaborate with people you already know. As opposed to that, Twitter is social media. It is not social network technology to just broadcast whatever you are interested in broadcasting, and people connect with you if they find meaning. And Summit for Surgery, the hashtag, was a way to promote connection around the concept of surgery, which is just a fantasy. Surgery does not exist. People exist. Surgeons exist, trainees exist, patients exist. Surgery is just a fantasy. So the only way to get people together in around a concept, to collaborate, is to create meaning. And SoMe for Surgery brought meaning in, because more and more people started tweeting using the hashtag. So people could trace tweets, could find tweets, could understand and trust other people who were tweeting using this hashtag. By doing this, you generate trust. And then you can find go congruence, which also contributes to create more trust. Trust is the most important value in this digital world. Otherwise, why would you believe a tweet including one link as a meaningful, truthful content, or is it just fake news? So we were trying to unite people, to make them connect. Then once they are connected, knowledge is like an infectious disease. It travels around the network. So if you seed the network with good ideas, first connection, then contagion. And it is well known. Nicholas Stakis at Yale has studied this. These two actions are key in offline social networks, but also in online social networks. But once you have a network connected and with knowledge and ideas and projects as an infectious disease, how do you keep them together? It comes feedback. You need to provide feedback to members of the network in order to maintain coherence and adherence to the network. And likes and retweets and social interactions, conversations are key in order to achieve that. So then we have connection, contagion, feedback. Now we have to deliver. And this is impact. Then we are able to publish, to disseminate very valid information, and establish collaborations like the SoMe for Surgery Virtual Summit, or tweet chats, or collaborations all over the world. People from Hong Kong to Colombia, from Norway to Nigeria. The hierarchy is flattened. And that's the beauty of this. It is asymmetric in the real world. You have a key opinion leader who wouldn't interact with an intern or a trainee in Nigeria. And now here, you can have a conversation like there were no hierarchical boundaries. So I think that's the beauty of SoMe for Surgery, and that is why it can be meaningful for for people trying to engage using this hashtag.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, and you left a few headlines in the answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Tonya.
We can see your passion for Twitter and hashtags, and we have here somebody who shares that passion with you. So, Dr. Vervoort, a few weeks ago, you published an article titled #Global Surgery, the role of social media in advancing the field of global surgery. And I couldn't help but notice that this is very different from what you've published earlier. So can you tell us why you decided to publish something like that, and how did the idea come to you?
Yeah, it's a very valid question. And I also definitely empathize with everything that Dr. Mayol has mentioned as well about the power of social media. In terms of kind of my own involvement with social media, specifically with Twitter, I've been active since 2016, a bit after the time that I got involved with global surgery and global surgery advocacy as a whole. And something that I quickly noticed is the strength of the community that was on there on Twitter, even though, as mentioned as well, there's no groups as you see on Facebook, on Twitter, but through the use of hashtags, through common language, there was still somewhat of a network built on Twitter. And you definitely saw that grow quickly with global surgery, or hashtag global surgery, that is then. Over the years, I've seen it grow and grow. I've met a lot of people, I've connected with a lot of people who have become my lifelong friends as well, thanks to that. But something that was very much missing, and that I noticed from different clinical and academic fields, was really trying to assess what actually the impact of this is by creating this network in a field where we're really talking a lot about health equity, about networking, about inequities and access to educational opportunities, to surgical care, etc., and how this would all tie in to actually create meaningful change through, for example, global surgery advocacy. Now, it is true that my academic work has never really focused as much on social media. However, most of my work has been pertaining to inequities and access to surgical care, and really trying to find solutions and find ways of addressing these gaps all throughout the world. And so in line with that, there's definitely a lot of messages that we found also through this network on social media, on Twitter, through the use of hashtag global surgery. And so back in 2015, we picked a 5-month period to prospectively analyze the use of hashtag global surgery without any kind of intervention, without letting anybody know that this was going on, just to make sure that we could kind of objectively assess what was going on and how that also temporarily, in terms of time as well, would change. And to no surprise, it was very widespread across the world, was very well reached in terms of different users, in terms of people from different backgrounds and different stages of their careers. But we definitely also noticed some action points for the community to work on, specifically in terms of language imbalances, because it was mostly focused on English, very little focus on other major languages, like, for example, Spanish and French, even though there are many countries, many low and middle income countries, where they speak Spanish and French and are not as familiar with English, but still have these gaps in access to care, access to educational opportunities. And so even though this was a very preliminary and very basic study in terms of global surgery research pertaining to social media, we definitely find some ways to really try and address this, to create a larger network and making sure that we're also not leaving anybody behind in terms of this form of global surgery advocacy.
Thank you.
I would like to connect you both with this, with the answers that you have given, because you are both, although different generations, you are both very active on social media, and it is somehow for many people very difficult to understand the real impact that social media can have on issues as global surgery. And it would be great if you could explain a little bit how to make that connection between a hashtag like a global surgery and the impact that can have on a community in a low-income country in Africa, for example.
So I can go first. Global surgery, the first thing you need to solve, the first issue, the first problem you need to solve when trying to have impact at a global level is when there are disparities, is to provide access to knowledge. That's key. It's more important than anything else. If there is no access to knowledge, just today I read something, knowledge sharing saves lives. And it has to be contextual. It cannot be something that we in a high income country decide that is relevant for people who know exactly their problems. So it has to be a conversation. This is not a key opinion leader somewhere in Madrid imparting knowledge to others. This must be a conversation. And the only way to connect people is if they find something that unites them. And hashtags work like a tag to identify people who share the same values, who can have a conversation, a deep conversation with you, trying to exchange ideas and knowledge, going back and forth to solve problems and unmet needs locally. Not this theoretical problem. It's this real problem that it happens somewhere that I have never been to and that I don't know. I have no idea. So access to knowledge is for me the most important goal and aim and impact that social media can have to address these global problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from my perspective, I can only resonate with that. There's a lot of merit in terms of social media, for example, letting people know what's happening at conferences, disseminating scholarly information through research articles that are coming out, etc. So there's, from the academic perspective, as Dr. Mayol has mentioned, there's a lot of benefits to social media, really trying to cross these barriers in terms of equitable access to educational opportunities, and then indirectly also affecting access to care. Also from another perspective, and really what has been most of my focus in terms of my global surgery advocacy work through Twitter, which has not been particularly focused to impacting direct meaningful change on the patient level, but trying to spread global surgery awareness at the higher level in terms of policy influencing, in terms of letting funders, letting international organizations, professional societies, etc., know about these issues pertaining to global surgery and making them more aware about the disparities that are existing around the world, but also the myths that are underlying addressing this field, because there's a lot of misunderstandings about how we could influence global surgery, how we could improve access to care, why we should improve access to care, that unfortunately have been very underaddressed at the higher level amongst policymakers, amongst funders, amongst professional societies, simply due to the lack of knowledge thereof. And so for me, as well as a lot of individuals in global surgery, and also #global surgery kind of as that community as a whole, a big part has been trying to influence policymakers and making them more aware about the actual needs as opposed to the preconceived myths that they have about the field.
So hearing you both, I'm under the impression that Twitter is good to spread knowledge and awareness among professionals and from different countries, break barriers in terms of hierarchy, etc. But where can patients benefit from this conversation that's going on between professionals?
There are many other options. You can have social networks, Facebook or LinkedIn, to create communities, so where you can be more specific. But social media, particularly Twitter, as a patient, you can find first ideas, second support, because you have initiatives like global surgery. If you're a patient and you're trying to get involved and engage with delivering better care, and you are interested in contacting someone, it's much easier to find the right people on Twitter than if you go on Facebook trying to find someone in a closed group. So Twitter is more open. So it gives you access to ideas, to knowledge, and third, to people who can help you out. And that's the difference with Facebook and LinkedIn. That's how I see it. Or Instagram, which is very interesting when you try to disseminate knowledge. You can post an abstract, a visual abstract is wonderful, but it's difficult to have a conversation. So that's the difference with Twitter. That's at least how I see it.
Yeah, I like that idea as well. And also, just in addition to what I mentioned earlier from more the indirect aspect on patients, because obviously trying to influence a higher level is indirectly going to affect patients in terms of changing these gaps. But additionally as well, there's a lot of patient and family organizations, for example, that are not necessarily individual patients, but typically are groups of patients that convene surrounding a common condition, for example, congenital anomalies or congenital heart defects, rheumatic heart disease. they then convene in different countries, in different regions as patient family organizations to, at least at the local level, try to bring more awareness about the condition, but also as patients together try and share their experiences in terms of what they have been facing, in terms of different providers that they have and how they have been treated and what's helped them, etc. And in addition to that, there's certain alliances, for example, from my background in terms of cardiac surgery and specifically from the LMIC perspective, there's the Global Alliance for Rheumatic and Congenital Hearts, which convenes patient and family organizations with patients from both congenital heart defects, rheumatic heart disease around the world, trying to, from the patient perspective, connect them with thought leaders in the field, with the latest research, with groundbreaking treatments, opportunities, et cetera, to make sure that everybody has the same access to this kind of information, but also that from the perspective of patients and not just from the higher level ivory tower of academia or policy, that there's also a meaningful conversation with patients themselves rather than very unidirectional to providers only.
And so to be able to understand this that you are saying, could you just give us an example of your major success in social media? Something that has been very successful in your practices?
In my case, is what others have achieved. For example, Jeremy Teo created UroSomi, which is SOMI for urologists, and they have been quite successful. They have published and they have created their own network for urologists. There are several publications that come from Colombia, which is a very interesting aspect, is how to use social media and Twitter in particular to contribute to continual medical education in countries where connections offline are not so easy to establish. And there are like 4 or 5 more papers showing how we can extract a deeper knowledge from our social interactions on social media. I'm really proud of people trying to understand other people through SOMI for surgery, because we spend a lot of time trying to practice a technique. We spend a lot of time learning a technique, and we spend less time trying to understand other people. I would recommend surgeons and trainees on social media to spend more time learning about people, because surgical care is about people. It's not about a technique.
I would say I've only had small wins in terms of my social media involvement. I've never really had a tweet that went viral or that was majorly impactful, at least to an extent that I know. I think I would, if I would have to name one, I would pick one that cost a lot of my time, but was also very much enjoyable, in the sense that back in 2019, so every year the World Health Organization convenes the World Health Assembly, which is all ministries of health, international organizations, etc., all involved with discussions surrounding global health, especially from the policy perspective and from ministries of health action. And in 2019 was the first time that the WHO and ministries of health had to concretely report on the progress made by countries in the WHO in terms of access to surgical care, anesthesia care, obstetric care in countries around the world, following the resolution back in 2015 that they adopted. Now, leading up to that and throughout the week of the World Health Assembly in Geneva, I came up with at the time, I thought it was a great idea. Eventually, it turned out to be very ambitious, but I stuck true with the idea of creating a 100 tweet thread with 100 distinct reasons of why we should invest in surgical obstetric and anesthesia care within global health. And while it was very time consuming, because it's hard to create 100, 280 character arguments, it was very well received. And I hope that at least indirectly, but also primed some policymakers, funders, other individuals who were at the World Health Assembly and saw these tweets about actually understanding why the WHO was reporting on surgery within global health, because for a lot of people, it's still a very odd combination, but also better understanding what the granularities are of this field and why people actually should care about it. So if I would have to name one, I would probably pick that thread.
That's really important in medicine, to remember that we are here, first of all, for patients. And speaking of the openness of Twitter and the fact that patients can also see what's going on, do you think that there should be ethical rules, especially for doctors using social media?
Absolutely. There are the guidelines. There are several guidelines. You must remember that what you share online on Twitter is not like a closed group on LinkedIn or Facebook, just by surgeons for surgeons. This is going to be public, and you cannot control who is going to have access to that particular tweet with what kind of comments. Something that is like business as usual for us may be very dangerous for people who have neither the knowledge nor the training to understand what you really meant with that tweet. Mm-hmm. So we must be very professional when sharing medical and surgical knowledge. And our interactions are being broadcasted to the world, even if we don't perceive that because we only have 10 followers. You don't know when it is going to go viral. And the impact is huge because people who read a tweet on Twitter, then they go offline and they make comments and they share what they have learned or seen on social media. So we must be very careful, and we have to pay close attention to some principles, and we have to follow, of course, bioethics. But let's keep patients' information safe. Let's not be arrogant or insulting to others. Let's be as the most diverse possible. I think this is a global issue. This is not just a chat in my living room.
There is this aspect that I'm very interested on when you write a tweet, and especially when you are a doctor. I reckon we can agree that there is a preconceived idea of how a doctor should be, and the way he should communicate and the way he should talk and express. And I follow you and I've seen your tweets, and you don't leave behind a sense of humor. Actually, the one you have pinned is Dr. Mayol is quite interesting as well and funny. But I'm wondering if from your positions, you have very different positions, and as well you are in a different stage of your careers. Before you post a tweet, do you think before, wait a second, this institution or that doctor or that person is gonna read this, and I don't know if I should be this informal or this bold? Do you sort of like have that in consideration before tweeting?
Good question. My position, I'm professor of surgery, I'm chief medical officer. I have like all the responsibilities that you can imagine, but I never think twice. I tweet as I am, as I feel. And of course, I'm mindful, and I'm concerned with not being insulting to others. I try to avoid any conflict, any direct conflict on Twitter. But whatever comes through my mind, it can go in a tweet. I'm pretty active. I've been on Twitter for like 11 years now. I started in April 2009. When I started following Jeff Matthews, my mentor, at Harvard Medical School, and then when he moved to Chicago, he started his account, and I decided to follow him. So I've been practicing for a while. I tweet a lot, and I probably have some skills that I have acquired over time. But probably from a professional perspective, we need to train surgeons in general, surgical trainees and doctors, to use communication skills. Sometimes we are not very good at communicating. In general, I usually say, paraphrasing Jeff Matthews, healing starts with communication. And we devote little time to improve, to enhance our communication skills. And Twitter is a good way to do that, because you know that you must be concise, you have to be thoughtful, you must look funny, otherwise you don't attract attention. But try to avoid conflict, because you don't want to go into this live quarrel online. So it's a good way to practice, and we should pay attention to that for our surgical trainees, to help them learn and acquire skills that are essential, not only to communicate with peers, but to communicate with patients online, because this is the new world, the digital world.
Yeah, I agree. Also, from my perspective, I am obviously much earlier in my career, having only graduated from medical school 2 years ago. And so I don't hold very large positions with a lot of responsibilities. But regardless, I definitely adhere to kind of the same attitude when I navigate the Twitterverse, in a sense that I tend to think before I tweet, in the sense that when I want to tweet something, I'll always double check just to make sure that I haven't, for example, misquoted somebody or summarized something from an article or so. Because as Dr. Mayol mentioned before as well, Twitter is open, and once you tweet something, even if you delete it within 5 seconds, if it's something offensive, somebody could have already screenshotted it. So I always pay attention to that just to avoid any conflict. In terms of kind of the image of being a doctor, obviously, because I'm still very early on in my career, I haven't pursued residency yet due to currently being in an academic phase of my career. It's a bit different, but I definitely try to maintain my Twitter profile being professional, being devoted to global surgery advocacy or to academia. Occasionally, obviously, there's always a joke here and there that comes between colleagues, but it's never in an offensive way, or never really dipping into politics, for example, because that's conversations that I try to refrain from on Twitter.
I understand. Thank you for that explanation. I think it's very interesting to hear the points of view on this topic, as sometimes Twitter can be very controversial.
I definitely share the importance of communication. Twitter is one example, but there are other ways of communication as well. And for example, Dr. Vervoort, I know you write a lot of academic papers and you've done a lot to advance global cardiac surgery as an idea. And Dr. Mayol, Antonio and I discovered that you wrote a novel.
Yeah.
So would you like to tell us more about Dr. Clint, who is your character, and what's happening to him, and what messages are you trying to communicate through this?
And especially as well, how to use literature, for example, as another channel of advocacy.
Dominique, you go first.
Sure, yeah. So I've never had the chance to write a novel, maybe in the future. But in terms of not trying to really pick the academic writing way in terms of scientific publications, etc. There's here and there's an editorial, but in the end, you're really preaching to the choir, to the academic community. But I engage a lot as well with op-ed writing, which I very much enjoy. When I was in medical school, I was editor-in-chief of our local newspaper of our university. And so ever since, I really enjoyed kind of more journalistic aspect of medical writing as well. And so that's also something that I've embraced moving forward. I think in terms of op-ed writing and more opinion pieces that you put out in news outlets or blogs, etc., there's a lot of benefit because unlike scientific publications where, again, you're preaching to the choir, to the people who typically already know most of what you're saying, with op-ed writing, you're also reaching a much wider audience. And those could be policymakers, those could be the general public, those could be influential people who you don't even know that you should reach them, because op-eds, blogs, etc., they're more openly accessible. Some of them are behind paywalls, most of them are not. So it's much easier for people to come across these, but also it's not written in academic jargon. It's typically with your own opinion, typically has a very tangible story, recent events that are linked to it. And because of that, also much more holds true for the people who are reading it and much more feels like they can resonate with it, as opposed to very dry and very academic style papers that you would traditionally publish in journals.
I think that human beings are we are a very successful species just because we tell stories.
Okay.
As opposed to any other species, we can create fantasies. And we spend most of our time either in bed, sleeping, or sharing information. If you write, you improve the way you think, you improve your ideas. If you tell stories, you reflect on what you think, on what you feel, and I think that you can become a better person by doing that. At least it's a way to express what is inside of us. And I enjoy sharing those ideas and fantasies with other people who can find joy in that process. And at the same time, they are able to create their own ideas and their own stories. And by doing this, society can advance and get better if we are really trustworthy, if we are sincere, if we have and share the same objectives and goals. So we have to use every channel available to be able to tell stories. I love TikTok, 15 seconds music in images. What a great idea. And we need to explore that because it can be a very effective way to tell stories, to get ideas across, and to activate other people's minds and brains to get the new thing, a better surgery, a safer surgery procedure, just because I saw something that made me think, that made me imagine, what if? So telling stories, writing, music, all those arts are essential for a trainee who wants to make a difference in the world. Oh, Dr. Klein is an HPV surgeon. It's an HPV surgeon. I'm colorectal. So, this was like my alter ego. I had in the past a blog in a professional medium here, and I created this alter ego to say what I couldn't say because I was who I was. But then it became a character, and now I'm writing a couple of novels around this Dr. Clint, who's Spanish, but originally he was from Austria, but he was born by accident in Spain. So two different cultures. And he's a very active HPV surgeon, but at the same time, he wants to, he serves as a freelance agent for intelligence agencies across the world. So, so I love politics. I love the stories that go on around politics. I love spies. This wall of spies is like very attractive. It's something very provocative, witty, secrecy, human passion, all those things are, I think that surgeons in general need to have this way to express their own feelings. That's something, there's this idea of a surgeon being like a very uptight person, not very communicative, rather reserved. I don't think that is a good image. We should be more open, more willing to learn, to share, to teach, to help others to become better people. And if they are better people, they will be better surgeons.
Thank you very much. It's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you both. Thank you as well, Zineb, for being here with us today. It has been a pleasure. It's been a really good fun to have the conversation and to learn more about you, but as well about your point of view regarding these topics.
Thank you. And thank you for the kind invitation and for the very smooth interview as well. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I can be of any help, if you think that I can do anything that can be useful for you, please let me know.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Zineb.
Thank you, Antonio. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
And for the rest of you, thank you very much for watching the interview. And you can find previous ones in our YouTube channel and keep updated with our activities and videos and interviews like this one in our social media. Thank you very much. Take care and keep yourself safe.